Davey, it's October 2nd. My name is Ian. I'm an artist. And I feel incredibly privileged to have been a player, to have had the opportunity to be your audience. And I have so much to say, but I want to try to keep this away from an incoherent ramble. So I'm making it during what should be an incredibly short drive to my workplace. This is my format, spoken voicemail. And I was really impressed by the opening introduction on Beginner's Guide. I haven't finished the game yet. I bought it yesterday afternoon. I'm not sure how long after launch officially that was, but I had been home from work about an hour by then. And it occurred to me that it was the launch day. I somehow wandered back into Twitter at the right moment, and saw tweets in your feed leading me to discover the existence of the Beginner's Guide. The Stanley parable all but changed my life as a game. I mean, following the footsteps of the rarest one-of-a-kind experiences, i.e. Fallout 1 and others. I mean, Stanley Parable was just overflowing with the same greatness of human emotional currency that Fallout was, and a few others in my list of all-time best experiential art. My favorite moments from Stanley were, and it is really tough to define favorites, but those two moments where you saw the humanoid form for Stanley. Someone was following Stanley, and if you were lucky enough, you would see the Stanley doppelganger walking in the hallway behind the office that you couldn't enter. And I remember in some paths it was possible to be back there in that area that you saw him walking. But the other moment was the one, I can't remember now, the paths that you had to take to end up here. I want to say it was related to the one where you go to the alternate boss's office and he wants you to speak, and he wants to know why you're not speaking. And then you reappear back in the two-door room, and you kind of exit Stanley, and you float up into the ceiling. And the narrator's in despair, because he just needs Stanley to do something to play the game, and nothing's happening. And just as I am now conveying this, it strikes me how inspired that moment is by the floating out of the world in Escape from Whisper. And just so you know, I have just completed the prison sequence and the house cleaning in Beginner's Guide, and I felt so compelled to reach out and interact, because it strikes me as one of the prime purposes of what you've created with Beginner's Guide is to open up an interaction and really give yourself to us, the players, and hopefully get something back, get some validation and just some regular, authentic human connection out of it. So I'm hoping that's what I'm being able to offer you back in this fashion, in kind of my preferred format. I prefer this format for around half a year now, after diving into the concept head on through a podcast called Note to Self. That's what they're now called. They had an episode featuring Listen to Your Voicemail was the title, and it was like a guest they had who had written an article, I believe, in Gizmodo. And I took hold of the format and I created a project to be somewhat of a hybrid personal podcast / voice blog / literal voicemail communication meant to be addressed to specific individuals in my life. And I wanted to speak to you. This format really allows you to put yourself in the room and get to the words that you need to say. It's so much more authentic than trying to write your communication. And it's really one of the only effective ways to hold yourself up to yourself. I'm sure you could probably relate to that statement with the work you've invariably had to put in to creating the voice over the narration for Beginner's Guide. I'm really curious to see where the rest of the game goes, because I have so many ideas about who Coda is or might be, or whether there is even a Coda in real life, if this is going to relate back to something important that happened when we get to the end of the timeline that you described at the beginning of 2008 to 2011. It feels like what you're doing is telling me a story. It feels like I'm in an episode of Risk, and there was really no other way for you to tell this story but by doing so as a game creator. Storytelling is the most powerful medium, and I cite Brené Brown in this one. She just put out the book Rising Strong, and she has such a huge emphasis on the importance of story in recovery and in just true human mental health and emotional equilibrium. I like how much focus you showed both in Stanley and so far in Beginner's Guide on emotional zen. And if I feel like if there was any purpose overall in Stanley Parable, it was that. The experience as a player of grappling with these labyrinths of despair, coming out on the other side okay, and just content to experience what you had experienced. Finally, to wrap up, the last thing I have to say right now is in regards to the prison episode specifically, and how you mentioned Coda. You mentioned Coda just didn't have a check in himself to slow down and step back and rethink. Artistically, I sort of feel like that's what drives the creation process. You have this desire to complete a vision that has basically stung you, that it's partway there, you've got something that you've basically discovered that has just shocked and awed you. You're sort of the archaeologist. You've just uncovered something fantastic, and you can't stop. And you just keep iterating and iterating until you feel like you've got something that represents the complete picture of what stung you. I feel like I went through this process over and over through the course of the last 6 years, my art, I write music. And I'm drawing lots of comparisons between my experience writing this music that I literally described with the words you said, talking to myself, no one else, really having no audience. Even though I did try to reach out and selectively interact with other artists in exchange, listen to their work, and get my work heard. But it feels as if that lack of a check kind of describes the artist's personality. But it also describes a state of low lucidity, a state where you don't quite have a zen emotional grasp on yourself. And I feel like that's also what this story is about, and that's what my story is about, writing my music, where the project began, where I ended up taking it, how I ended up renaming it based on a motif that came about during the darkest moment of my life, in which I almost attempted suicide. I renamed the project Dreams of My Death, and I feel that I've finished it as of now, as I've taken the majority of the best work and used it as soundtrack to my voice project. I really put myself in the room over the top of this alternate self, this fictional artistic me that exists inside the music. The music is really the soundtrack of what it felt like to be me over 6 years of what essentially amounts to pre-PTSD lucidity, a self kind of trapped in stone, whose only outlet to be real was connection to artists sharing themselves, notable ones, 9 Inch Nails, a few others. I've got a quote that I intended to throw out during this recording to you from the character Snowman from Oryx and Crake, and it's, "Why was everything so much like itself?" I hope you're familiar with the book, but if not, it's right up your alley as a creator of this type of content. So I kind of experienced creating the art in this way from a really, really limited vantage point. And I've got a commentary in the same format here, a voice note, describing this experience in more detail and the philosophical of the artistic, of that aha moment for your audience where all of it, the purpose ties together, the underlying thread becomes clear to them. And I feel like that happened for me with my art, and completing it feels kind of like showing up and arriving. So I titled the entire set Absence. The soundtrack of me being not quite present in my life over these years. So I hope you'll listen to it. With this, I'll include the link in the download code so you can get the complete work, including the commentary track, off of my Bandcamp. Hopefully you'll find this relevant, and you'll feel that I've offered myself to you in the same way that you are offering yourself to us in this artistic work, which is really the purpose of art, is being honest at any cost, no matter what you feel like other people might think about it, just being able to put yourself there. That is so real and so incredibly, brutally perfect as a human. And I say thank you. I really appreciate it. Okay, I have to narrate part 2, which I wrote in the email to Davey. At that same moment. Let me advance the track we're listening to first. Not that one. Let's do this instrumental right here. Demo 170. We actually collaborated on this one last March-ish. Okay, so let's read this. Oh, here we go. October 2/15. Stanley, Coda, talking to oneself. Stanley Parable's exploration of solipsism, nihilism, simulationism, among other things, really spoke to me at an incredibly primal level. I played the mod before learning of the bigger project's development. I remember what you said in a podcast interview following the full release about the handwritten notes for the game, that crazed fog you inhabited at times during its development. You said, originally Stanley Parable was just me sitting on a park bench scribbling furiously on a notepad, like a lunatic. No. Part 3. Since you are giving and have given your audience you, I'm responding back and giving you me through my art. Okay, this is a description at that present moment of the musical project. At the intersection of cinematic score, video game soundtrack, and ship/techno. Melodic, uncompromising, breathing, seething, relentless, beautiful, dissonant, and resonant. I am happy to exist in obscurity, making the music that I want to hear. I want to hear honesty and vibrant self-affirmation, acceptance of everything. Right now, being enough, not having to have a plan. Joy and pain of present-day history. I have decided this project's era is finished. After so long talking to myself, it's ready to fly away and be free, whatever that means. It's entitled Absence, April 30th, 2015. The soundtrack of myself. Dichotomies contained in the sound, each a moment of what it felt like to be me, not quite present in my own life. Part 3, B, title line, Beginner Stanley, 11/5/15. I've shown these games to all of my friends repeatedly, and it finally hit me. Stanley and Coda are opposites. Stanley's world is one where you can try out all the fantastical paths, and they're all you. Or there is no you. That's the dark message. You're trapped by this. Coda's lesson is, you are who you are, period. You're gonna be stuck in an echo chamber trying the same thing over and over until you land on the thing that expresses it clearly. Then, all the prior shots in the dark with a long space between them will make sense and will be connected by that thread. Here's a bunch of things that appear to be choices and branch points in the moment, but no, you can't do that. You think you can make choices? No. Davey's glee in telling the player to stop wandering and looking for secrets. You can only be you, and external validation cannot create that. Only you can. Stanley perpetually surprises the player with a compelling spiral of defiances, and Coda perpetually surprises the player with the opposite, a lot of choices you can't pursue. This is what makes it beautiful and haunting. Here's a PS note that was originally written to the soundtrack composer Ryan Roth. Cathexis is the term for a person's emotional investment into an object. The interesting thing about self-expression through fiction is that we are able to shed limitations of the actual physical self and become whatever we want to be, a truer expression of our identity, an expression that can't be found until we are deep within space that belongs to our imagination.
Cathexis sort of describes it backwards, in my opinion. Our emotion springs forth from what we find inside. That is what creating is about. Finding truth that can't be verbalized as me the person, but can be expressed with integrity from behind a mask of fiction. I think this is why the band Slipknot hit me so hard as an adolescent. Okay, that's the end of that one. I have one more song to feature here from the demos segment, and then I'm going to play the beginning half of my new compositions, which occurred in 2018, middle of 2018, the summer. I've stuck Alan Watts' narration behind the newer tracks, the ones that followed this, but these stand alone as completely non-verbal tracks, so I'm not going to add any narration. I'm going to make it an intermission here.
read the notes.
I found these items. There were more, but this is as much as I can show. Your note from today called If You Can't Wake Up says, if you can't wake up, you should. Human wake up, sex, 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 You want to die outside because you're already dead. Die. Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z Z. Wake up. Human. Human. Do you want to hear the next one?